Hi, I'm Taylor from Clarity Magazine, and actually I was asked to do a little video on social media. So I thought, rather than doing anything too deep, it might be things that you've kind of heard a little bit before, I thought we'd just create some space for you to maybe take some personal kind of notes on your experience of social media and how we can kind of perceive social media, how we might want to up our social media game, even if that's stepping away from social media, and actually just create an environment for you to discuss and chat with each other about things that you might struggle with or ideas you have, or just a little about your perspectives. So I'm going to have 3 questions for you. We're going to discuss the face, the body and the mind. Nice and easy. You might want to jot those down: face, body and mind. And we're just going to chat for a couple of minutes and then stop for a question every now and again. So, the face. I think so often we can chat about our lifestyle, how we're living, how we're loving people, which I think is all incredible. But I think so often we can think of social media as a very secondary thing, which it kind of is, but we kind of put it over here in a box. And actually, I think more often than not, social media is our first face. You know, it's the first thing people see. You know, people take, I think it's 7 seconds to make a first impression. And I don't think it's that different with social media. If that's the first thing you see, it's going to be the first impression people get of you. So I've got a few acquaintances. I would love to call them friends, but they'd probably be like, what? So acquaintances that have like a huge following on social media, they're big influencers. And what really kind of amazes me about them, bearing in mind, you know, these guys are kind of like, you know, presenters, performers, some are in like the cooking world and different things, but what really gets me is that they put right away in their bio, you know, I love Jesus, or it might be a scripture, or it might be like a link to their church. And I just think, like, wow, okay, because these are people that would, you know, get magazine interviews, TV opportunities, and yet they're putting that out there regardless of the effect it will have, and actually probably thinking it's going to have a great effect on people, and that's their priority. And I'm not saying there's a perfect way to do it, but I just think it's something that stands out to me when I'm looking around at people that I aspire to be. Now, some of you may be thinking, yeah, that's totally fine. Like, I do that on my page, and my page is squeaky clean. And for others, you might be thinking, well, I'm trying to kind of sit somewhere where I'm showing that Christians are just normal people and we're cool. Which I maybe fit a bit into that bracket with my personal page and, you know, when we started Clarity Magazine. And for others of you, you know, you'll just know full well, and I've been there, that, you know, your pages and what you're putting out maybe doesn't look that different to everyone else at all. And, you know, I'm not saying it has to be something radically different, but I think we just need to soberly judge, you know, what we're actually portraying. You know, am I someone that is, it could be something as simple as just moaning all the time, you know, no joy out there whatsoever. Or maybe it's, you know, you rely a little bit on your possessions and that's something you like to share. Maybe it's, you know, you're not that honest about what's really going on in life, and it's just this constant kind of perfect picture, which we see a lot. Maybe you're just a little bit naked. We've seen these accounts. Maybe you're just not wearing enough clothes. Whatever it is, no judgment here, but I just think it's really important that we decide whether our pages are promoting what is good and resisting what is evil. And it's as simple as that. And as I said, no judgment, it's something to think about. So question 1, I actually just want you not to, you know, analyse each other's pages, but actually to think about whether there's anyone that you follow, kind of like my acquaintances, that inspire you, that you think are doing it well, and maybe just share with one another some of the things that they do. Oh, now's a good time to pause. Okay, so that was the face. And the next thing we're going to discuss is the body. Now, you've probably heard before, the Bible discusses the body of Christ. It's the church, all working together, all having their different parts. While one person might do this, another person might do something completely different, but everything works together towards a common goal. And for you, you might be thinking social media is just not a thing to me. Some of you might be thinking I was born for social media. And for others, you might even just be taking a step away just for your own well-being, or maybe to avoid certain temptations, whatever it is. Everyone is different. But what I do think is important is that we come towards a kind of godly perspective in ourselves with how we see social media, and also just kind of have a kind of unifying outlook when it comes to what is possible with social media. So if we teach and we preach that God can work things together for good, if we believe that he can make the barren fertile, that he can bring life from death, and that the same power that does those things is at work in us, then I think it can be a bit silly to think that a place that might be a bit dark will always rub off on us and create a darkness in us, rather than having the faith to believe that we will go into a dark place and bring light. And many people do think that social media is like a darkness for our generation. So often we can see these kind of darker areas. Maybe it's online bullying or kind of weird, seedy dating apps. Maybe it's body image posts or the perfect life kind of things. And we kind of forget that we are actually the hope of the world and that God is the one that transforms us. You know, when we see God leave a situation and the church come out of a situation, we see the chaos increase. We see people getting further into their mess and sin and confusion. You know, I think when we see these areas in society and in our lives, we should be thinking, oh man, we've got to get in there. So as I said, we are a body. I wouldn't necessarily expect everyone in real world kind of mission to go into, I don't know, gambling arenas, or maybe work with the homeless, or into, I don't know, nightclubs, whatever it is, I don't know. You know, sometimes God will have specific people in mind. So if it's not wise for you to be in a situation, don't force yourself in. But if you are finding yourselves in situations where you're seeing things that you just think need a bit of hope or need a change, then pray and begin to make that change. And so question 2, in terms of the body, is, you know, what is it that you're seeing or that you're actually passionate about on social media, or perhaps even just in our culture that kind of crosses over, that you want to see a change? And maybe some of you will have some ideas or things that you're already doing to just tweak those things. So time for the second pause to answer that. So thirdly, we have our mind. I think it's really important that we are aware of how social media can affect us. As I said, you've probably heard some of these things before, but some things that come to mind are kind of, you know, advertising. How many adverts we see a day? It's apparently 400 to 600 ads we see a day, and social media makes a massive contribution to that. The constant kind of consumerism, I need this culture. I'm quite passionate about kind of beauty, and some of the stuff we talk about in the magazine is women's perception of themselves and the culture that we live in. And I think just recently we were kind of researching the fact that kind of national eating disorder charities have found that 70% of women aged 18 to 30 are unhappy with their body and kind of don't see themselves as beautiful. And that 18s to 30s bracket, I don't think it's that much of a coincidence that they are the kind of social media generation, if you like. There's the constant comparison culture. There's just so much. I'm sure you can think of things yourself that we'll just see all the time that might not be that helpful. It's just a world of options and, you know, scrolling opportunities to just see different things. But I think what's really important is you guys have discussed a little bit about what we put out there and how to kind of tidy that up and make an impact. But it's just as important to kind of take note of what we're taking in. I feel like it's so simple, but for me, Philippians 4 has such an easy guideline for the things that we should be spending time on or taking in. I'll just read it actually, because if I memorise it, it'll probably come out wrong. So yeah, in Philippians 4, it tells us that whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, I like that one, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard, so learned, received or heard from me, being God, not me, definitely not me, put it into practice. And I just think that is so helpful. Like, it's so, I don't know, it's so simple, but I will often kind of check what my mind is doing against these things, even if it's just like an argument with my husband or stressing out about running Clarity and how we're going to make steps forward. I kind of check myself, like, am I focusing on what is excellent about this thing or praiseworthy, or am I acting in a way that matches what I've heard from God? And it just kind of reshapes your mind and refocuses kind of where our priorities should be. So I think it's really important to almost just do like a social media cull and go through and think, are these things bringing these qualities to me in my mind? Are they focusing my thoughts on the good things or things that are detrimental to me? And actually, it's not just what we're taking in, it's the amount of time that we are taking it in for. Again, you'll have heard all the kind of horror stories about screen time. And I do love social media, and I do love working on my laptop, working on my phone, but it's just a fact that it does affect our mind negatively if we do it too much or we're consuming the wrong things. You know, during this kind of the 2020 COVID-19 outbreak, I realised my laptop actually told me, I got a new laptop and I didn't realise it did this, it told me that I was spending an average, I think the most recent was 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day on online, on our browser or social media, and that includes the weekend. So I think I need to take a step back on that sort of thing and keep an eye on that. And also, that doesn't even include my phone. And yes, like, a lot of it is work, and with Clarity, a lot of what I do is social media, which is totally fine. But I just think it's important to just take note on how much that becomes a part of our day. You know, it does have a knock-on effect. It can affect how easily we can go to sleep, you know, our melatonin levels, our sleep cycles. It can affect our concentration. It can affect our relationships. There are plenty of things you can research on that. Or just get Clarity magazine, because we talk about it a lot. But yeah, there's just so much stuff. And I think it's not something we need to run away from. Or actually, to be fair, maybe you do need to have a little break. But it's just thinking about how often do I just take time out? When was the last time I sat with my paper Bible, you know, or a book, and just kind of rested my mind? One thing I love doing at the moment is actually listening to audiobooks. I thought I'd find it really awkward that having someone read in my ear that I don't know, but I'm like a little bit addicted to audiobooks. It's just so nice to plug in your headphones and get like hooked on a book without having to kind of stare at your screen. Great for the commute, so I would recommend. So question 3 is just a real honest one. Is there anything that you need to do or that you are doing to put in place to protect your mind or even renew your mind when it comes to social media? So this one is less about what you're putting out there, but actually more about what you're taking in. Well, it's been great to virtually chat with you. Hopefully you've been able to come up with some sort of idea or a little bit of inspiration for your own social media life. If you want to follow us, then please go to the Instagram, which is @ClarityMagUK, and Facebook is exactly the same. It's just facebook.com/ClarityMagUK. If I'm smart enough, I'll like put them on the video somewhere. And it'd be great to connect with you there. And of course, we do talk about this stuff in more detail, with a bit more science, a bit more psychology. So you might find something a little bit deeper for you there if that's what you're looking for. Have a fantastic day and see you soon.